Welcome to the first LedRep Network meeting of 2025. Welcome to a new year. Let's do this. We got this. Thanks for joining. Just a couple reminders. The LedRep Network meeting is available to any LedRep, new or returning. I won't say old. We'll say new or returning or seasoned or wise LedRep. Also available to any school board member in general, because there's important information available to any school board member. It's just specifically designed here to help LedReps figure out what the heck they're supposed to be doing. So that's information coming from me and coming from each of you. Another reminder is that we do record these so that they are available to you in case there was a part that you were just like, what the heck did that person say? I want to remember it, and you can go back. And because lots of your fellows are unable to join at the noon hour, there's just really no good or perfect time for the whole. So we're doing the best with what we got. So thanks for being here at noon. And then the last reminder I will just offer is that if you could please mute your microphone, that will ensure that we can move forward without too much background noise. Although I will invite you to ask questions in the chat. You may ask a question, or you may have a comment about something that is mentioned or discussed, and I will invite you then to unmute your microphone if you need a little more clarification, or if there's something that you'd like to share relevant to the topic at hand. So thanks for being here. I'm sure you have lots of questions as we are about to embark upon a new legislative session. I'm going to give a little bit of context for the session ahead. But before I get there, because there are new school board members or just new LedReps joining us today, I'm going to share just some baseline information, just a little bit of background information. Some of that information will be repetitive to some of you who have been doing this for a bit. So thank you for your patience. Maybe if you are a returner and something is repetitive, there was a story or an example that you would like to illuminate as to why that information is important, we would love to hear it from you. Go ahead and put comment in the chat and I'll call on you when it's appropriate. So before I get started, if you would mind putting in your chat, what school board you serve on and how many years you've been a LedRep. And that might be 0, and that's cool too. It'll give us an indication if you're a newbie and we need to do a little extra TLC for you, or if you're a returner and maybe I can call on you to answer some questions. So either way, your name will be automated. So your district and how many years you've been a LedRep would be great in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start my screen. I do hear someone's microphone open, so if you would please mute your microphone, we'd all appreciate it. Great. So I am cheating a little bit here. This presentation is multi-purposed. There are some relevant slides to advocacy work that have been pulled from the annual conference Strategic Advocacy Academy. So you'll see some things familiar there. And then I also have been working on a presentation that I'm delivering to a group of superintendent interns this Friday. You'll be pleased to know that superintendents are eager to learn what school directors do and how WSSDA supports that work. And so I think it's important to think about, as you're advocating year-round in the session and outside of the session, that you're doing that as a school board and superintendent team. And so some of my framing is around that, and also just something for you to be keeping in mind ongoing as you do your work. And I am sorry, I know that somebody's microphone is off, and I'm going to try to figure out how to mute you, unless you did it yourself. Okay, I think it's resolved for now. All right, so with that, just a little grounding in Washington State School Directors. So who we are, WSSDA is your state agency. We are codified to exist in statute to support all 1,477 locally elected school board members. Every school board
It
member.
may not make sense for every client or in every campaign. It may be some dated events or end of year type stuff where they don't need to continue into the next year. And that's absolutely okay. But you do need to go in and cancel your jobs. It is automatically.
Great, thank you.
I got it.
Thank you, Trisha. If you wouldn't mind being my mute support. Executive Director Trisha Lubach and mute support.
It's that second one is a really important role. I'll cherish it.
It's the other duties as assigned.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. And as part of the work that we do in support for school board members and school boards across the state, we provide ongoing resources, materials, training, and expertise around the work that you all are doing. I want to caveat all of that with you do not need to know all of the things that need to be done around your school board role, much less how to advocate. We are here to help support you in that and just will remain ever available when you have questions. We assume you'll have them, and please don't hesitate to ask. We don't assume that you will know all of this out of the chute, or much less even in a year. It takes a long time to build an understanding for this work comprehensively. So thanks for being here and starting the learning process. We have 14 full-time employees here at WSSDA, just about to onboard a brand new policy analyst who you will get to know in the future. His name is Levon Williams, and he comes to us from a rich background in education programming, particularly around graduation pathways and student success outcomes. He also has a degree from Evergreen University in public policy, and so is very passionate about the intersection between student outcomes, public policy, and public education. So he'll be onboarding tomorrow. I'll probably be giving this presentation to him because he has a lot to learn along with all of us, including myself. That's a little bit about WSSDA. I also wanted to let you know that WSSDA Advocacy, so the Strategic Advocacy branch, is one of 3 branches in the organization. There is also Policy and Legal, who primarily is responsible for developing the model policies. And there's also the Leadership Development, which provides ongoing training, professional learning for all of you boots on the ground, both in-person and virtual formats. So my branch, Strategic Advocacy, is responsible for representing you during the legislative session based on your member-adopted positions, which are student-centered, nonpartisan, inclusive, and the work that we do. One of my philosophical and ongoing goals is to remain engaged with all of you. That means that I'm sharing information as I learn it, but I'm also learning from all of you about what stories need to be told to our legislature. I'm responsive, so when you have questions and send them to me via email or by phone, I work really hard to be sure I get back to you as soon as possible. And if ever there's a delay, you should assume that's because there are 10 to 20 other people who have questions at the same time. And I promise I'll get to you ASAP, particularly during the legislative session when things are moving at an incredible rate. And because we represent a wide swath of school board perspectives and we remain consistently engaged with all of you, we see ourselves and believe ourselves to be, including based on feedback, a credible source for public education advocacy and information with our state and federal legislature. And I owe that entirely to all of you who help keep me apprised for what's going on the ground in your own communities. My personal philosophy of good advocacy work, it kind of our philosophies across just the life spectrum about how to be good at lifing, remaining curious. I don't know everything there is to know about advocacy. I'm learning every day. I would encourage you to remain curious with me. Asking questions is always a good thing. I have built a lot of competence just by doing the thing. You may not feel competent at advocacy, or maybe you feel really competent. If you feel competent, I would encourage you to share your knowledge with others who may be on the spectrum of learning how to feel more competent and confident doing this work. Confidence builds over time. I will give you lots of opportunities to lean into opportunities to advocate for your board and with WSSDA. And so as you sort of gain some bravery and decide you want to weigh in one way or the other, we are here to help support that effort. And the more you do, the easier it gets, I promise. And I think I can assume for all of you that you're committed to ensuring that students have successful outcomes and that the staff who support and serve them that you represent in your communities deserve your representation and therefore are committed to doing this advocacy work. So those are the philosophies I hold with me, particularly as we start this next legislative session. Normally in a in-person sort of format, I would ask you to turn and talk with a partner about what you think advocacy is. And so in the absence of being together physically, we're together virtually, I would ask you in the chat to type one word when you think about what advocacy is. What do you think is the most important word that comes to mind when you think about effective advocacy? There can be ineffective advocacy. I'm less interested in those words. So what does good advocacy look, sound, and require in order to be effective? So Sarah Betnell's heard this a few times. She got my favorite word, which is relationships, connection, collaboration. It's authentic, it's clear, provides clarity. It is in service. Definitely agreeing on relationships. It's respectful, requires some understanding. Understanding comes from communication. It's great. Lots of good words here. Appreciate your perspective there, and you are all right on. Just a reminder that advocacy includes activities, a variety of activities I'm going to get to that is intended to influence public policy, laws, and budgets. It can be done by an individual or a group that aims to influence and should use facts and be built upon strong relationships, using media and messages to educate government officials and the public at large. As we look to the start of the 2025 legislative session, as well as in the in-between times, we've got a whole year. In fact, there are about 200 plus days every year or more that are not during a legislative session. We have 105 days during this legislative session to advocate, during which time you'd be able to provide testimony, meet with your legislators, potentially write an op-ed at the local level. You could present at a public meeting at both the local and state levels. You could be sending emails to your legislators or also at the local government level, city council or otherwise. You could be sharing information via social media. I would issue some caution around the tone and tenor of that, as I'm sure you are well aware. You could be sign waving for a candidate at the local level, hosting or participating in book clubs or conversation groups, posting an initiative or another type of sign in your yard. You can vote and you can call or text an elected official. And then there's a ... just to implicate that there are lots of different ways that you can be advocating, and there's no best way, perhaps, but the most effective ways are always done in collaboration and through relationship. So just differentiating a little bit between advocacy and lobbying, I am often called a lobbyist, and I like to be sure to clarify that all lobbying is a form of advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. The primary difference to separate the two is that both are intended to influence decision-making at the local, state, or federal level. Lobbying more explicitly asks for a decision or end result. So if I were lobbying, I would go to a legislator and say, please vote no on this bill. I do not do that as a public servant, state employee, or representative of a nonpartisan organization. The difference is when I advocate, what I am doing is sharing stories, stories, data, facts, as well as member adopted positions that would seek to inform or educate elected officials on how they might decide to vote, honoring school board perspectives from the local level. So education, advocacy at large as a form of education. Lobbying has a lot more of a direct ask. I think it's important to differentiate between those two because you, at the public servant, local elected official, also have some parameters around what you're allowed to do or not to do using your public equipment, as well as your public forum. And I would encourage you to talk with your local council about, or your district council about what's most appropriate for you. But again, that's a line that's important to understand as we enter into the legislative session, that sometimes it's not appropriate for public servants like myself, or potentially like you, to ask legislators to do something specifically, but rather to educate and inform them and help them make their own decision based on what education you provide. I also just want to be sure to recognize and remind everyone that WSSDA, your member organization, is nonpartisan, which means we do not take position on any position based on Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal. We are agnostic to all of those labels, I will call them, because our position is always in alignment with member adopted positions, none of which say anything about whether something is conservative or liberal or independent or Republican or Democrat in nature. They're all about student outcomes based on your words and your process and your majority adoption of perspective. It is important to think about partisan and bipartisan politics as we enter a legislative session, most specifically because that has an impact over whether or not bills will be successful. As we'll get to this in a minute, but you are probably well aware that the Washington State Legislature, as well as our executive branch, are all majority Democrat. And so the majority of legislators voting on a bill will be Democrats, and therefore often what we see in terms of policies coming out of our legislature may be more Democrat leaning in nature. It is always critically important that we work across the aisle and build relationships with Republicans and Democrats, because every legislator, regardless of their affiliation, will vote for or against every bill that has any chance of getting passed by the legislature. So it is important that we're working with all legislators, regardless of their location or their identification in terms of partisan legislation. And one last thing just to note is that our legislators are often bound by partisan politics in terms of how they vote and weigh in on bills. And I think that's just important to remember as we're interacting with our legislators, that they are responsible for representing their constituents, and also they are navigating politics within their own party, within the legislature, that we may or may not fully understand, but should be empathetic and compassionate about. And then I love this sort of concept. Generally speaking, it's way more fun to advocate for things that we're for. And oftentimes that's where we get the greatest response from our legislators, when we're able to support their bills and elevate legislation that's good for students, staff, schools, and communities, and is in alignment with a legislator proposal or bill. That's great when all those things come together. Sometimes we have to be against bills, and there's a way to do that that is honoring of differing perspectives. So we work really hard when we have to be opposed or against a bill during session, that we do so in a way that is transparent and, as much as possible, leans in towards suggesting amendments or alternatives in the case there were any way to get a bill that we might be opposed to a bill that we could be for, or at the very least, just be neutral or other on. Nobody wants to be against bills. It's not enjoyable. It's not fun. Sometimes we have to do it, and sometimes there's no way around it. But before we are forever opposed to something, the first conversations I usually have with a bill sponsor is, here are the things we are concerned about. Is there a way we can shape this bill so that it's more in alignment with WSSDA member positions and still is getting to what you are hoping to achieve with this proposed policy? That's always the first attempt, and sometimes the answer is no, and then we have to oppose a bill in its entirety. And just then the last reminder I would advise is that all of this is a long game. Some of you are well aware that bills take a long time to pass. That's a good thing. Again, just to reiterate that when a bill is introduced during session, it starts in a policy committee, then it moves to a budget committee, and then it moves to rules, which is sort of the gatekeeper of all bills before it moves to the floor. So really, a House bill has four major steps to get to the floor on its own side of the House for a vote. And then if it passes those steps, it repeats that process over on the Senate side. It is really hard to pass a bill, and that's a good thing, because sometimes it takes a long time to get a bill the way it needs to be, to honor the intent, as well as to ensure that it is implemented with fidelity and with the resources that are necessary to do it well. So sometimes that means it's going to take a few legislative sessions to get a bill right. And sometimes it means that a particular issue that's important to you is going to take a few sessions to get attention. Either way, we have to remain patient that what we need and what legislators are trying to achieve typically does not happen overnight. It is a long game. I've talked quite a bit or referenced member-driven advocacy in alignment with member-adopted positions. I'm happy to show you the positions catalog if you haven't had a chance to, but just so you know, this PowerPoint presentation will be available to you, and there is a link on this slide that will take you to a comprehensive, let's say robust list of member-adopted positions. There are 233 member-adopted positions currently. All of those positions inform how WSSDA as a representative organization weighs in during the legislative session. There are differentiations between the positions. Specifically, there are legislative positions and there are permanent positions. Legislative positions are more action oriented and maybe more contemporary. They start by saying WSSDA will support and or initiate legislation that ... And permanent positions start with WSSDA believes. So permanent positions are generally thought to be the core beliefs or values of members, whereas legislative positions are intended to be more action-oriented with a specific aim for advocacy work. However, when we are looking at bills during the legislative session, we are looking at all of the member-adopted positions to find where there is either alignment or tension between member-adopted positions and bill proposals. And I will just say that most bills are complex enough that we have positions that both support or oppose, well, I'll say and, both support and oppose a bill based on some pretty key issues. Usually a bill proposal in terms of the issue area or topic may have multiple positions where members have decided they are supportive. However, as you may have experienced before, many bills are not fully funded or adequately, amply, or sustainably funded, and or reduce local control in a place that should remain at local governance. And we have positions that would indicate that membership would not be supportive of a bill proposal in those cases. So oftentimes we have both, and so there is a tension that leads us to testify in the middle or neutral. Here are the ways we are supportive of components of this bill, and here are ways that we are in opposition or have concerns about this bill. How WSSDA positions inform advocacy, just in terms of a cycle. So if we think about legislative and permanent positions being adopted by members at the annual General Assembly. So if you're thinking about this as a timeline, this is September is the starting point. So we have a slate of, or a catalog of member adopted positions. Some of them are already adopted and not touched, but some of them may be amended or added during General Assembly in September. Following General Assembly, then members prioritize the legislative positions, and that is what determines what WSSDA's legislative priorities for the next session will be. Those priorities are usually adopted in October and released either towards the end of October, beginning of November. Once those positions are formally adopted by the WSSDA board, then we distribute those priorities WSSDA staff, and we hope you, our members, take those priorities to your legislators to share what your primary interests are. And we continue to use that as a guiding document during the legislative session. The way that looks for day to day for me in particular, or WSSDA staff, is that if there are any bills that relate to, for instance, this year's priorities, special education, materials, supplies, and operating costs, transportation, school staffing, generally what the full funding of basic education would be, there are any bills that touch on those 5 priority positions, I will be fully active with the legislature. In other words, I will be testifying, I will be meeting with legislators, trying to ensure that those bills continue to progress through the session. And I will also be calling on all of you, either directly through this network or through the legislative committee members who represent your director areas, to help activate you during session to weigh in at specific times when it is needed. And then during session, WSSDA staff will use all of the positions to determine if and how to weigh in on a bill during session. So even if it's not a priority, we are taking a look at any bill that's introduced during the legislative session that touches on public education in any way, that could be directly or indirectly, to determine if we have member adopted positions that would indicate a need for us to weigh in. And again, that could be we're weighing in as pro, con, or other based on your member adopted positions. Then just another example or a way to help with understanding how positions become positions or proposals become positions. Several years ago, we lined out a side-by-side. Some of you are familiar with the Schoolhouse Rock, I'm Just a Bill. It's actually it's not just a good ditty, it is informative and accurate. A bill starts as a concept from a constituent and takes it to their legislators. The legislators determine whether or not they're going to bring a bill forward. And then it goes through the process of the legislative cycle. Similar to that, a proposal is also a concept by a school director who brings it to their school board to then submit through the proposal window, which is always in April. That will be true this year as well, overlapping with the legislative session. And then that proposal makes its way into a handbook that informs what will be debated on and voted on during the General Assembly, which occurs every year in September. You will have one voting delegate representing your board to vote for or against those proposals. If the proposal passes with a majority vote, then that proposal becomes a position. And then those positions are added to our catalog, which inform our annual advocacy work. I mentioned our legislative priorities. Hopefully you have already printed these out and shared them with your legislators, either in person or via email. If you haven't, it's not too late. As a reminder, right now would be a great time, if you haven't done so, to send an email to your legislators saying, we understand legislative session is starting. It will be busy and full. We wish you all the luck in the world, and we are here. We serve as resources for you when you ever have questions about public education. As a reminder, here are the things that are most important to us as we enter this legislative session. So just a nice, friendly reminder that you're there, you're a resource, and here are the things that matter to us most. I've mentioned maybe once or twice before that advocacy is a year-round cycle. We are about to embark upon what many of you might consider either the most exciting or the most scary part of that cycle. It is absolutely the busiest time, where there will be the most communication coming out from WSSDA about advocacy work. But again, I will just reiterate to you that the majority of every year is what we call interim. That's when relationships are built, and you need those relationships during the legislative session to influence outcomes. So given that the legislative session starts next week, you may or may not have relationships with your legislators already. If you do, that's wonderful. It will definitely help. If you don't, then again, I would invite you to at least introduce yourself as a resource to your legislators, and prioritize, following the legislative session, a coffee or tea in district with your legislators to thank them for the work that they achieved, because things will happen this session that are good, and there will be things left undone or that are of concern. All of those are content for conversations following the legislative session, and what could be the beginning of a strong working relationship with your legislators, hopefully to the point that you have their cell phone number and you can text them information that they may need, always reminding you that everything that you text is public record. I'm going to sort of move through these next slides fairly quickly. I'll focus on this one for now, as it's relevant to this next part of the cycle. It actually lines out by quarter the various ways, most obvious ways that you can engage in advocacy work with WSSDA or on behalf of your board. In the interest of time, I'll skip through the next slides, but just to focus, our aim for you during a legislative session is that you are communicating regularly with your legislators. And that could mean that you're first communicating with your own legislators, but also, the chairs of the education committees are very thoughtful. That's Representative Santos on the House side, Senator Wellman on the Senate side. They represent a larger swath of the Washington citizenry than just their own constituents, because they really will determine which bills get heard in committee. And which bills will be up for a vote from the members on that committee. So it doesn't hurt for you to be familiar with them, although always start with your own legislators, because those are the most important relationships for you to have. You can testify, show up on priority issues. You can also testify and sign in on bills that are important at the local level. I can really work closely with you on developing testimony or how you might show up on WSSDA issues. But if you need some technical assistance and support on how to sign in for a bill because your own board wants to be sure it's on the record, I'm happy to walk you through that process. Never hesitate to reach out. Hope you'll be attending WSSDA's legislative conference this coming weekend. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it's already here. This will be a skill building opportunity and a bit of motivation, a rallying cry around please advocate early and often as it relates to our organizational priorities, specific to those that align with our partner organizations. Will be focused on special education, MSOC, and transportation as we move into the session, and know that there are bills already in the works on all of those issues for us to be able to weigh in on. Some of you may be interested in federal advocacy. There is a NSBA Federal Advocacy Institute that will be in Washington, D.C., February 2nd through 4th. Let me know if you have any questions about that. During the Washington State legislative session, I hope you will attend our weekly in-session live webinars. Those will be recorded and live on Thursdays at noon. Also hope you have subscribed. And then once you subscribe, actually read the in-sessions that are distributed every Friday. It will give you a high-level overview of what just happened and what will happen next week, at least in terms of schedules. I can't predict what will happen in any case, but with your involvement and influence, we might be able to shape what the outcomes are. Hope that you are providing time on your either bi-monthly or monthly board meeting agendas, an opportunity as the ledge rep to report. And that might sound like a big scary word, but really all I'm saying is as part of the report, you would be taking the weekly in-sessions. If you're meeting every 2 weeks as a board, then you could take the 2 weeks of in-sessions, combine the information, and just pick high level some of the things that are most pertinent to your board. Here's what's happening. Here's what's continuing to move forward. Here are some calls to action that I need for your input on or involvement in. So we really try to make that as turnkey for you as possible, meaning that we're providing the information through the in-session live on Thursdays and the Friday in-session publications, the information that you need most specifically to help inform your fellows about what's going on during the legislative session. Might be nice also for you to enable your student board reps to weigh in. We'll be continuing to meet with the student rep network also throughout session, and they may have some insights that will help you as you're thinking about advocating on their behalf. And then I would encourage y'all to start reading the WSSDA positions already. Even though it seems like April is a long way away, we will all be very busy in between now and then. And your board must review the existing positions in the case you have any proposals to bring forward. You certainly don't have to. And I would encourage you as you're thinking about positions where there might be duplication or an opportunity to retire positions. I think our primary goal this year is to make the catalog more usable and accessible for all members, and 233 positions probably is more than is necessary to do the type of advocacy work we need. So really encourage you to take a look at those positions from the lens of where is there duplication and what have we already accomplished, or what language is no longer necessary to exist as part of this year's proposal window. I'm going to skip through these months. They are important, but I want to get focused a little bit more specifically on 2025 legislative session. I'll just remind you that all of the things I'm telling you is a cycle, and we continue to do them over and over again. For good news and bad news, advocacy is never over. So there's always an opportunity to refine our approach. So what we know as we move into the next legislative session, we know that there is a new governor for the first time in 12 years. We know that there's a new attorney general for the first time in 12 years. We know that there's a new lands commissioner for the first time in 8 years. And we know that there is a new insurance commissioner for the first time in 24 years. These are significant changes after we got used to people being elected officials being in those roles, whether you agreed with their approaches or you disagreed, or maybe a combination of both. At least you knew a little bit more what to expect. To some degree, we'll know generally what to expect based on politics or political affiliations here, but ultimately, these are each new people with their own ways of operating, and there's a learning curve associated with that for all of us. There is some consistency, however. We've got returning lieutenant governor, superintendent of public instruction, secretary of state, treasurer, and state auditor. All of them are returning for either a second or a third term. All of these people are influential because they impact the tone and the tenor of a legislative session. And as we enter this legislative session, all of them will have very strong opinions on what could be labeled as revenue reform. We're gonna say it's synonymous with taxes. So Tax will be a big conversation this session. All of these elected officials will have opinions and influence over those conversations. Some other things that we know is that there will be 22 new legislators or returning legislators in new seats or roles. That's a big number. And that means an opportunity to build new relationships. But it's kind of like whenever you have a new school board member or a new superintendent, even if the majority is the same, you still got a new team. And so with 22 legislators in new seats or roles, we've got new teams and new committees and new chair leadership that will influence how bills progress and what the conversations are like during session. And some of that we just don't know until we get started. So we'll start learning here pretty darn quick. There will be changes in leadership. Most specifically, we have a new Senate floor leader, had been Andy Billing, sorry. And now as we look to a change there, we will be learning about how that influences how Senate policies move forward. You all have heard this, there is a budget shortfall. What the specific number seems to be a moving target. Ultimately, though, that will impact the conversation and is certainly the setup for a conversation around the need for a change in revenue or taxes, and that will influence a lot of conversations this entire session. Regardless of all of that, our priorities remain the same and public education's needs remain the same, and the constitution of the state remains the same, that we are the paramount duty. Legislators, I would say this is good news as we talk with legislators. Haven't talked with many legislators who haven't heard about the big three, which are 3 of our 4 priorities. And that means that we have momentum already in action before we start session. And we know that because bills are already drafted, pre-filed, and on their way. And I'll also just remind you that we do know there will be opportunities, there will be successes, and there will definitely be some disappointments. What we also know is that we're going to need all of you to be advocating regularly on behalf of your own board and in partnership with WSSDA regularly for us to keep our priority issues alive and focused, regardless of what the revenue conversations are or how the state funds public education. That's really their job to figure out, not ours. Our job is to ensure that students are getting what they need and that the resources are there to meet those needs, and that's what we're advocating for. Pre-filing has already commenced, and there will be hundreds more bills filed before the policy cutoff. That means that we will be navigating, especially in the first couple weeks of the legislative session, a huge volume of bills. Despite our message, please don't ask us to do more before you give us the resources we need to do what we've already been expected to do. But there will be a lot of bills. The good news is most of those bills will not pass. It can be good news. Some of the bills that don't pass will be bills that we actually want to pass, or they will change significantly. But the good news is that we will continue to weigh in on policies that could be unfunded or otherwise burdensome to school districts outside of member adopted positions. That means we have an opportunity to really shape things as they go. I see an outdated component here. The governor's proposed budget was released in December. It was not favorable to public education. I will say the good news is, on that note, while it is disheartening to see that governor will not be our governor, is not our governor going into this session, and because the governor's proposed budget maybe a temperature check on how people are feeling, on how the legislature is feeling. Generally, the legislature makes their own decisions around the budget, and that will be heavily influenced by our new governor and conversations around tax revenue. Which I said we will be asked to weigh in on it. WSSDA will be agnostic. We do not have a member adopted position on that. However, your own communities may be pushing on you to think about what you think about tax revenue, and we will leave that to the locals to weigh in. There are lots of bills on the horizon. Like I said, we know that there are some already in the works about member adopted priorities. I've mentioned to you before that there is a bill by Senator Claire Wilson that I'm deeply concerned about and have shared that with her. And will ask all of you to also share your concerns as we hear it in committee, that essentially would allow OSPI to intervene when school directors and or superintendents, quote unquote, woefully disobey the law. And while I think we can all agree, we expect elected officials and staff to follow the law, there are ways that accountability has already been baked in, either to recall or the election process for school directors, and through bargaining and contract with the superintendent. We would argue that that is not the role of OSPI to intervene in these cases, nor should they have the opportunity to withhold any dollars from school districts if a school director or superintendent is disobeying the law, as that ultimately punishes students as opposed to school directors or superintendents. So more on that, but I just want to alert you that that bill has been in discussion and will require some participation from everyone about it. Financial literacy has been an ongoing conversation. There will be a bill that will come forward this session again. We have taken a look at it. It is more flexible than it was last year. I think I understand that generally speaking, school directors are supportive of ensuring that students have what they need to be successful in life. Financial literacy is one of those things. However, it would be a change in graduation requirements, and y'all are navigating enough as it is right now to be shifting things would be challenging. So there are some ways to bake in some flexibility around that. If we have a little extra time, I'd love to hear from all of you what are some bills that you're hearing about and potentially have questions around. What we don't know, we have a sense for what final committee assignments are, and ranking minority leaders. However, none of that has been updated on the Washington State Legislature online website, which is challenging because it'd be nice to know who's on what committee and where they'll be sitting. I anticipate that the Washington State Legislature website will be updated within the next few weeks. That doesn't help you right now, but as that is updated, we will be sure to help you navigate it. Final committee schedules are pretty close to being done. We know what's coming up here in the next couple weeks, and I can share that with you. We don't know what we know in terms of changes in leadership as well as changes in committee structure. We'll get a sense for all those things as we get started. We don't know how and when changes at the federal level will impact Washington. I know many of you are anticipating and concerned about how Washington will be impacted there. Not to say that you should or shouldn't be concerned in any way. We just don't know really right now how, if, and or when it will change. But I do know that our governor and legislators are aware that there could be an impact, and I know that they are paying attention to that, and we'll know more once things commence. And then we also don't know what the proposed revenue package will fully entail. Once we see it, we'll be sure to let you know. How WSSDA will help support you as you are navigating all these things. We have In Session Live, like I mentioned, on Thursday, the publication on Friday. We will have a comprehensive bill watch list. So as bills continue to be introduced, we will post that to our website. We will have this meeting monthly, so the first Tuesdays at noon, which we will record. We will also be hosting the Student Representative Network meeting. It's the last Monday of the month, also virtual. We have Federal Relations Network meetings that actually are meeting more frequently right now in anticipation for many folks going to DC next month. However, other than that, we either meet monthly or quarterly, depending on what's going on. And then we also have a Trust Lands Advisory Council meeting, TLAC, as it's fondly referred to, that also meets monthly. and you are more than welcome to join both TLAC and Federal Relations Network as a school board member. Would love to have you there if you have capacity and time. Information about all of these opportunities are on our website, but if you have any trouble finding them, please don't hesitate to ask. A little bit more information about how to subscribe to In Session Live. You've got a link here. Please go to that website to sign up. If you were signed up previously, it's a new link, and so you will need to resubscribe. If you were signed up for In Session previously, that will remain the same. And then if you are, well, you're here, so you already know this. So that's good, that's your test. But if you wanted to share this information with anybody else within your director area, please feel free to do so. Here are some resources from student reps. This is a lot to absorb as a new ledge rep. If you are one of them, I will just tell you that many school boards have student reps. You may or may not be one of them because WSSDA helps support school board members. We also have worked with the student reps who participate in the student rep network to design some guidance documents that may help school boards navigate what it means to have a student rep program and how to authentically engage your student reps once you get them started. Last but not least, wanted to remind you that the ledge.wa.gov website is refreshed from last year, just into, I think, November, just before annual conference. They released a new look and some new functionality to the Washington State Legislature online website. To get you started if you haven't had a chance to peruse it. I think the bills page and the legislator page are the most relevant probably to your immediate work. It shows you a couple different ways you can go about finding a bill. I'll do more detailed training on this once we get into session and have some specific bills that we're tracking. So this will be helpful. And then also, like I said, it hasn't been updated yet, but once it is, it will be very, very helpful on this page for legislators. Underneath all the lookup information, there's actually a full list with photos of each of the legislators. When you click on those links, it gives you bio information, as well as bill sponsorship information. And most importantly, I think in the short term is which committees they've been assigned to and sit on. That helps us to navigate who we need to go to and when about specific policies as they're progressing. There's my contact information. Should you have a question or need to reach out, I am here. And that was a lot of information to provide to all of you. So my guess is you're taking a deep breath, or you tuned out, or you're feeling overwhelmed, or maybe some of you are like, I already knew all that stuff. Either way, I am available if you have any reflections as to what I shared, or if anything, if I missed any helpful tips from those of you who have been doing this for a while. Is there anything else that you would recommend we pass along as helpful? Anything I missed? Feel free to type a question or comment in the chat. I have a question here while you're thinking. Is there a possible bill requiring all school districts to buy electric buses in the future? I am not aware of that bill this session. You may know that there was a bill that addressed mandatory school buses in the previous legislative session, and WSSDA was instrumental in ensuring that our member adopted positions were reflected in the final bill, which gave school districts a lot of flexibility around how to implement that with adequate resources to do so. And so I think for now, we're in a good place in terms of having access to resources should you want to move in that direction, but not having to do it in the short term. So that's what I know now. Hopefully I'm not surprised there. And then another question about needing to connect with trust lands advocacy. Elise would love to help you with that. I'm actually going to put, well, I'll put my email in the chat for any of you who need it. Sometimes it's just easier to click on something. But I will also tell you that Russ Pfeiffer Hoyt is the chair of Trustlands, the Trustlands Advisory Committee. He knows more than probably all of us put together as it relates to Trustlands information. Just a really great wealth of information, has been the chair of Trustlands for quite a while. I'm going to put his email address also in the chat just so you have access to it. If you want to reach out to him directly, I know he'd be more than happy to help you navigate that. Let me just get this in the chat here. So this is his name is Russ Pfeiffer Hoyt out of the Mount Baker School District. There you go. Lakeisha mentioned something to me about connecting with DA Ledtrep for support. I'm going to take a breath so I can get a sip of water. I got a little tickle in my throat. Lakeisha, would you elaborate on your note there for the rest of the group?
Sure, Marissa. I love it when you do that to me. I was just actually messaging Sarah Buttonell to see if we have the list, but Lakeisha, I'm the chair of the legislative committee. Marisa Peliquin is currently the vice chair of the legislative committee. And we have a few of the other legislative committee members here. We are representing you on Ledge Committee. So if you need any support through the process, feel free to reach out. I know I really appreciated calling other Ledge Committee members to say, what's going on? What does that mean? Where is that at? And then what do I say to my board? So just know that we're trying to help you as much as possible. Last year, we were able to make a PowerPoint that I know I used at my board meetings to kind of share out what was going on and update. So I don't know if we're going to do that this year. I hope we do. But again, your DA reps are a great resource if you want somebody close to home to talk to. And Sarah just put the link in the chat. If you would like to click on that and find your DA rep, they will also be sending you emails most likely that kind of surmise some of the information that's happening during session, or they might email you and ask you questions to get your voice. So it's just another way to stay connected to the process, if that helps. Does that sound about right, Marissa? Did I cover
That's
it?
great. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I appreciate having your voice here and for all of the leadership that Lakeisha and Marisa provide Ledge Committee. We meet every week during Ledge session, the Ledge Committee does, and particularly discuss and address bills where there's a lot of nuance. I mean, most bills have nuance, but there are some that are particularly either contentious or challenging or difficult to understand. And the Ledge Committee really helps to navigate on their director area behalf how WSSDA should weigh in, again, based on member adopted priorities and feedback that they receive from you when they ask, tell me what's going on in your district as it relates to financial literacy. That information really helps to inform how we weigh in with data, facts, and stories. Had a question about when we'll see the 2025 bill watch on our website. I would anticipate by this time next week, we'll have a first draft up. And any info on the new governor wanting to move OSPI to a department under the governor is just this talk or a serious proposition. It's a great question. We're still learning a lot about the governor, and so I think there's more that we don't know about the governor, the incoming governor, than we do know. I will tell you that there was a bill within the last couple sessions that actually was brought forward in partnership with OSPI, proposing that the superintendent of public instruction be an appointed position as opposed to an elected position. There are many states that actually have a similar structure besides Washington. And so right now, the superintendent of public instruction, I imagine, has an opinion about that, and in the past has been supportive. I don't know if that's still true. And so I don't know, what's a serious proposition and what's not a serious proposition. We're going to find out. There's a lot of things for them to be talking about, though, this session, and I'm not sure if this is going to be one of the things that's most important to them. again, we'll find out. If your board, so Sarah, you're saying if your board has recently done reorganization of board officers, yes, please send your updated board president and ledge rep contact to WSSDA. Yes, please do that so we can keep an updated list. And sometimes you have more than one person serving as ledge rep. That's fine too. Just be sure that we have all the information we need there. All right, it's 1 o'clock. If you feel overwhelmed or like you don't want to do this anymore, please don't give up hope. Okay, we got you. There's a lot of collective wisdom, support, and compassion in this group. Anything that you do will help. So if all you can do is read in session, that's great. If you want to send an email to your legislator just introducing yourself and being a resource, that's great. If you want to give testimony, but you've never done it before and want a little help, reach out to me. I can connect with you and work with you to do that. So just do something. That's it. It could be read. It could be passive. It could be more engaged. But just do at least one thing that you didn't do before this session, and it'll help you build some confidence that you didn't have before. And I will promise you, it's really not as hard as it may look or feel. And last but not least, just please consider me an ongoing resource for you. I'm with you through the whole session. And if you want to come down to the Capitol and be my little sidekick buddy because you want an experience at the Capitol, it's a pretty cool thing. And I'd love to show you around and introduce you to some folks. So let me know. I am your legislative concierge. Happy New Year. Happy 2025 legislative session. We got this.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything that you do. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.